All right. As you can see by the backdrop, I have changed venues and I'm now in downtown Minneapolis at my young daughter's apartment. She's not so young anymore, but younger than me, certainly. So, we've been talking about the Bodhisattva path as the heart of the Mahayana and of the Bodhisattva as the ideal figure, someone working for the salvation of all sentient beings, it says, all sentient beings. And pretty much anybody can be a bodhisattva. The person sitting right next to you now in the calf, wherever you're watching this, could be a bodhisattva working in disguise, working on, sort of incognito to bring other beings to enlightenment. But there was a path that they traveled, and they had 10 perfections that they would work on to as they moved along this path. And got closer and closer to perfection. I can remember 6 of the perfections usually, which are morality, meditation, giving, forbearance, vigor, and wisdom. That's 6. Good. And but there were 4 more, and they would sort of work on all of these things, and sort of again and again and again through multiple births. And whereas for most of us, it's our karma, good and bad, that sustains us and keeps us getting reborn, according to Buddhists. From Mahayana, as these people get closer and closer to enlightenment, the thing that keeps them going is, in fact, the power of that original vow. So they take this vow and then they engage in these rigorous practices to perfect these perfections. There was also a whole class of beings called celestial bodhisattvas. They had never been people, had never been humans, and they really function much like gods function. People pray to them for help and can get help. And so the word bodhisattva in some ways is like the way that we use the word saint in English. So it can refer to an ordinary person who's just sort of a real exemplar. When somebody says, my mother's a saint, we know what they mean. That their mother is sort of a model of something, but we don't necessarily think that their mother has produced a couple of miracles in the Catholic Church and been canonized by the Pope. That's the other sense of the word saint. So the saints that people pray to or intercess with is perhaps better in Catholicism. Saint Anthony for finding things, Saint Joseph for selling property. What's her name? There are many, many saints, and they all have their functions. The bodhisattvas are like that. And the 2 that I want to mention now, the first of these is called Avalokiteshvara in India and Guanyin or Kannon in China and Japan. In India, this photo here from Ajanta in the 6th century is conceived of as this sort of young prince character and royal, and his name means the one who looks down upon the suffering of the world. And so this is one of the things that he just, he's good for. He hears the cries of people, and the sutra which was told about him said, if you need anything, call on him, and you will get whatever you need. You want to be rescued from a fire or a flood or from robbers, call the name, and that will be that. This person will come and help you. And so there's a sense of always being available to suffering people. The other one, this was on one side of a doorway. This picture on the other side of a doorway was this figure. Come on. There we go. Manju Shri. Golden crown like a prince, he often carries a sword. Manjushri is the embodiment of wisdom, and the sword actually cuts through ignorance. That's why he carries it, because it does this. And so between the 2, especially for Mahayana Buddhists, compassion and wisdom are these sort of interlocking virtues. Compassion helps you wisdom helps you understand what you should be doing to help people to be effective in teaching them. And compassion gives you the motivation to actually do this. And these 2 things interlock and reinforce each other. Really, really important figures, and they stay important throughout as Buddhism travels throughout Asia. Okay. Um, these celestial bodies, as I said, have never been human beings. They are invoked like gods, so people sort of pray to them. Oh, where'd that go? There we are. Sorry about that. Um, the other thing you see in Mahayana, another interesting thing, is this notion of differing bodies of the Buddha. And what this basically did was a way to diminish the importance of the historical Buddha as sort of the one and only figure and to say, no, there have been many Buddhas through the universe. He was just the one that we know about. And so they talk about three bodies. So there's the earthly body, uh, Sambhogakaya, which is the historical Buddha and is limited in place and time. There is also a heavenly body, Nirmanakaya, which there are many, many heavens, remember? And the Buddhas go in each one of these, they make appearances. So this is multiplying this even more. But the third and the most omnipresent was the Dharmakaya, the Dharma body, which is everywhere in the universe. It's omnipresent, it's universal, it's the ultimate truth, it's eternal, it never changes. And so this eternal Dharma body is always there. And so, as I said, this motion was really to, in some ways, diminish the importance of the historical Buddha for this more abstract Dharma body principle. Say, no, the Buddha is always present everywhere in the universe, even if there is no historical Buddha there. So, just running through just some differences between the Theravada and the Mahayana in terms of their perspective on the Buddha. The Theravada talk about him as a human teacher who lived and died and realized the truth. And his teaching was the final, you gave teaching and that was it. That's what you were supposed to do. The Mahayana talk about the three bodies of the Buddha, which diminishes, as we said, the historical Buddha's importance, and said that the original historical Buddha's teaching was only the provisional truth. It was what people could understand at the time rather than being the ultimate truth. The ideal figure for the Theravadins is the monk or the person, an arhat, a person who's gained individual nirvana, and that's the goal. For the Mahayana, your ideal figure, of course, is the Bodhisattva, and your ultimate goal is nirvana for all sentient beings. In terms of organization, the Theravadins had a very strong division between people who had been ordained and lay people. The ordained people taught, the lay people supported them financially, and the two were interdependent on each other. But there was this sense that the people who had been ordained had this higher level of religious status. And a lot of Mahayana texts work very vigorously to undercut this, to undercut the notion that the monks are somehow better. And in many Mahayana texts, a Buddhist monk is sort of a buffoon figure who thinks he's special, but doesn't realize even how much he doesn't know. For the Theravadins, authority came from their lineage, from their teachers, and from the texts in the Pali Canon. For the Mahayana, it came from the Sanskrit texts, the Mahayana Sutras, such as the Lotus Sutra, which we looked at for the parable of the burning house a little while ago. And they're also different in terms of region where they were prominent. The Theravada in South and Southeast Asia, Sri Lanka, Thailand, Burma, Laos, Cambodia, whereas the Mahayana went up the Silk Road into Tibet and into China on the Silk Road, then to Korea and Japan, and then later down to Vietnam from China. So they're geographically distant, different. For a while, Theravada Buddhism was called Southern Buddhism because it is relatively southern, and Mahayana was Northern Buddhism, but that doesn't really tell you much about it. They're really different, though, in terms of their tone. Okay, the last major bit was the Vajrayana, or the diamond vehicle. So we saw the Mahayana, or the great vehicle. The diamond vehicle, they so-called both because a diamond's very hard and because it can cut anything. And so this is a very precise and powerful vehicle. But it's a subset of the Mahayana. The diamond vehicle assumes the Bodhisattva path, but it basically then envisages certain practices which give you greater powers. And that's one of the things, one of the claims it makes is that it is, in fact, far more powerful than other sorts of things. So it's a ritual-based practice. And in these rituals, you identify, you visualize the Buddhas, you identify yourself with them on one hand, and you gain their powers. It's also based on channeling energy inside the body. And when we were talking about the Hindus in terms of spiritual paths, we talked about the yoga path channeling the energies in the subtle body, energies inside the body, and it's the very same sort of, the template's exactly the same actually. Some of the specifics are different, but all of this, this yoga, Kundalini yoga tradition basically comes out of, I think, an older tradition and sort of bled into both Hindu and Buddhist thinking. But they needed to say, they did say it was more powerful. That's the reason they say it's better, because you can get enlightened in a single lifetime of practice versus many lifetimes. But because it's so powerful, they said it also needed to be kept secret so that you didn't want it falling in the wrong hands, people who would misuse it for their own ends. And so it's very common for students to work with teachers for a long, long time before they would be initiated. One of the things that you see in the Buddhist Tantra is these mandalas, and these are symbolic cosmic roadmaps. And for something like this, each one of these is a named figure. And so you would often start at the edge and sort of work your way around the edge, work your way finally to the center, working from multiple to one thing at the very bottom. Ooh, don't want to do that. One thing to the very bottom, in the very center. So you work from the multiplicity of the world to the thing which is the single unifying truth of the entire world. So these are visual representations of that teaching. So I'm going to stop now and talk about the